32, 16, 8, 4, 2, and 1. All right. So basically, this is what we were doing before, and then we learned something right here. That when we convert this 8 bits here, when we have 1 1 1 1 1, all this when we gather it together, we have 255. So basically, this is what I want to remind you guys, so you can know that this is what I did. So 255 0 0 0, because all the other bits are on, they are part of the host person. So that is it. So the subnet mask is telling you that the first octet is the only one that is part of the network, because all bits are part of are all off. So here all the bits are on. So right, when we say on, that means those bits are usable. So when we say off, that means those bits are already represented in the network and they cannot be used. Okay. So for class C, for class B, the subnet mask, the default subnet mask for class B is 255.255.0.0. This is telling you that the first 16 bits of your network address are part of the network, and the other 16. So here the first octet all bits are turned off, the second octet all bits are turned off, and the last two all bits are turned on. So that is what is going to tell you that you have a CIDR, or you have a classful subnet mask of 255.255.0.0. So that is the class B. For class C default subnet mask, the default subnet mask for class C is 255.255.255.0. This is telling you that the first 24 bits are turned off, and then the last 8 bits are turned on, and they can be used by host devices. So the subnet mask tells where the network portion ends and where the host portion begins. So sometimes they will tell you, it doesn't tell you where to find or where, but it's telling you still where to find it, because it tells you where the host portion or the network portion ends and where the host portion begins. So that is one thing. So guys, I hope you're following, and if you have any questions, you can always write underneath and ask your question, or you can text me directly on the WhatsApp group. I'll be willing to assist you if you have any question. Now, we're now going to do a simple calculation, but now in all the addresses that we have, when we are calculating addresses, in every class of address that we are going to calculate, there are 4 addresses that you need to identify. What are those addresses? First, the network address. Sorry about that. The network address, the first valid address, the last valid address, and the broadcast address. Okay, these 4 addresses are very, 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 very important in finding. Okay, now there is something that we did right here. If you look at it, we did some calculations right here, and here we're saying the number of hosts. Okay, now the formula is that whenever you have a particular network, and each of the networks, you have a network address and then you have a broadcast address. These 2 addresses are not usable. They are invalid IP addresses. You cannot use them for any device. Now, the first address and the last address of each subnet or each network are not usable. I repeat, the first IP address and the last IP address of each network is unusable. They are invalid IP addresses, and they cannot be used by any device. Who uses them? All the devices use this IP address to identify what network they belong to, and all devices in a particular broadcast domain or in a particular network, when want to advertise to all devices, they will use this address. So therefore, this address cannot belong to any device, because it is used as a broadcast in a particular network. So the first IP is the IP address that is the first valid, and the IP address that is the last in terms of validity. So how do we get what addresses are valid and what addresses are not? So the calculation here tells you, and this is our last part of our video, I think, where we're going to talk about the usable and all. So we're going to do subnetting later on. Now, in a class A address, the number of valid host addresses would be calculated like this. So this is what we do. Now, each time that you calculate the number of host bits, you have to subtract 2, because what I just explained right here, that this address, network address, and this broadcast address are not usable. So therefore you are going to subtract those 2 addresses from this, then you can get. So right here, this number, when you say 2 to the power of host bits, the number you have is what we call block size. That means